Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Victoria Denholm, CEO of Wollemi Capital Group, and we are sitting centre court on Hoops Capital East. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you for having me, and we sure are. Welcome
are.
to our beautiful court.
It is a beautiful court, and thank you for hosting us. And have you done any podcasts live on centre court before?
I don't think I have. I have filmed for other things, but not a podcast. You can have that.
Thank you very much. Yes, no, we're going to get into it. We're sitting here on the Tuesday, the 13th of May. How's your Tuesday been?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to jump right in, Jason Tatum may have just popped his Achilles.
We were talking about that before. We were reenacting it.
Die-hard Celtics fan, so it's quite a tragic day for me. But, you know, in the face of adversity, down 3-1, I think we will bounce back.
Yeah, and we were talking about Guy Sebastian on the weekend as well. Did the same thing.
Oh,
do you know who Guy Sebastian is?
I do. He came to a Kings game actually last year.
There you go. He was playing a casual AFL game on the weekend, and off the ball, just wandering all in, and then like the sound and the clap and everything. It looks like Jason, I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, but I saw
unconfirmed,
sort of
but it looked pretty bad.
And he was grabbing his ankle around the Achilles. I'm so sorry to hear that. But you did have your time last year.
We did, but as everyone, we want to win all the time. And, you know, again, my allegiances to the Celtics are as a fan, but as the Kings and Flames and now the WNBL, winning is very important.
Where's that little sense of competitiveness already? Where's that competitiveness come from?
That's a good question. I think, you know, growing up with an older brother, just that sense of competitiveness. I think my family is probably innately a little bit competitive about things. You know, board games were always fun growing up, but I think just, you know, being around sports for a long time as well, it's fun. It's a bit of fun.
Yeah, and the interest in sport, where did that come about? When was the little moment you remember back as a child potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember a specific moment. Sports just always kind of been part of our family and part of our interests. I think, you know, again, having an older brother, I probably grew up in sports before even really being aware of it. I remember the first active sport that I did as a kid was swimming. We were swimming from a very young age here in Sydney, but the first organized team sport I played was softball and then basketball when we moved to the US.
You moved to the US, but before we get to that, the team versus individual sport, what did you like the best?
Team sports, definitely. I think I'm much more, I have a lot more fun in the team environment, I think, as well as like that competitive juice. I think from an individual sport perspective, it's, you know, like so many hours by yourself doing the same repetitive thing, and there is that in team sports, but I think the team practice environment and kind of growing as a team is really rewarding and kind of how I think I thrive. And
moving to the US, your exposure to sports, global sports, the mecca, the capitalism powerhouse of the world, I suppose, when it comes to sport. What are your memories of sport in the US? Yeah,
so the first place we landed in the US was Colorado. We landed in Boulder, Colorado in 2001, home of the Denver Nuggets in 2001.
That would have been really not so good at all.
Yeah, they were terrible. The worst team in the league.
Carmelo was there?
No, not yet. Their best player was Shvedisvili, if I'm not butchering his name. And then Juwan Howard for a moment in time. They were terrible. But they were in the 2001 NBA, so we got to see Allen Iverson come through. We got to see Shaq and Kobe come through. We got to see Michael Jordan on the Wizards
Allen Iverson for the Nuggets, that's right, yes.
Yeah. Yep. No, he wasn't on the Wizards. The visiting team.
Oh, the visiting teams, of course, yes.
Fun teams to watch for the visiting teams.
That's right. And so you grew up watching some of these players, and you went to Kobe, you said?
Yeah, right? Kobe and Shaq, they came through as well.
Yep. And playing sport over there? Did you play sport over there?
Yeah, I mean, swimming very quickly stopped when we moved to Colorado. I'm sure you can imagine temperature and swimming were not very compatible.
Yep.
But I think, team sports was really, and that was kind of the age where I, you know, again, played as many sports, mostly for my school, that I could. And basketball was very much the highlight of the year, and kept playing. I mean, that was fourth grade for me, so I was quite young and played basketball through high school, and then in high school did what a lot of athletes do and choose the sport they're better at as opposed to the sport that they like more. And so I pursued lacrosse through high school, and
very US-centric college system lacrosse.
Yes.
You enjoy it because of the fast pace.
Although it's an upcoming Olympic sport, which is great to see.
Yeah. What is it about sport that sort of attracted you to play it firstly and to be a follower as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember a specific moment where I, you know, chose I feel like it's just something I've always done, but I definitely feel it even as an adult, like missing playing. I still play socially, and to me, it's both the social community element as well as like the fun and the outlet as well. It doesn't really matter what's happened in a day when you get on the court. You're just focused on that task at hand, and I think that that's just kind of a really good way to reset your central nervous system, as well as the social elements of seeing your friends and playing a sport.
Let's talk Wollemi Capital Group for a second here. What is it? When was it formed? What are the principles and values, and what are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, so Wollemi Capital Group is our family office. We were formed almost 5 years ago, and very much are impact focused in the way we deploy capital. And so we have 3 kind of core pillars for us. The first is climate and the environment, and we invest across asset classes, everything from early stage tech that we think will really disrupt the climate ecosystem, all the way through to large scale renewable energy projects to really accelerate that energy transition that we think the world is facing a really big climate challenge. And so for us, that is really important, both from a thing that we care about, but also from a capital deployment. Like there needs to be a lot of money spent to accelerate that change. The second pillar for us that's really important, and again, impact focused and kind of ironic to be talking about in 2025, but is diversity. We invest both across gender diversity, so a lot of the work we do both in women's sports as well as female founders and female fund managers. We also deploy capital to support other kind of groups of people that the capital markets overlook. We do quite a bit of work with First Nations, Indigenous businesses and causes as well. But for us, it really is deploying our capital in a way that people who don't necessarily have access to, but have great ideas and have great kind of outsized returns for us is really important. And then the third pillar for us, which is why we're here, is community. And as I spoke about, sports in general have been a really big part of our view of community, but basketball in particular has been really kind of foundational to our family from a community sense. And for us, Matt and I had this moment when we were forming the family office that we're like, we want to invest in basketball. How do we get mom on board? And she was very easily swayed, I think, both from the impact that sports and basketball in Australia has had on the community, but also the value add that we think we have as a family from a business point of view to kind of upskill and bring basketball to be kind of a tier 1 top sport from a professional perspective in Australia. And
you started with a sort of a minority stake in hoops, and it's moved up to the point now where it's majority. And then the big announcement about the acquisition of the WNBL, which kind of put Wollemi a little bit more on the public focus around that. Can you talk about thinking about that before that happened, the idea around it, and sort of being a fly on the wall in some of the early discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they all kind of intertwined, and Mum has spoken about the famous LinkedIn message she sent to Paul Smith, the former majority owner and now minority owner of Hoops Capital, and really kind of the person who brought the Sydney basketball teams back together. Obviously, in the early 2000s, they were under the same banner and then split up, and to bring back the Flames and Kings under the one ownership group and try and really kind of cement professional basketball in Sydney as kind of a reaching thing was really his idea, and Mum reached out to him and said we wanted to get involved, and it happened quite quickly, to be honest. And part of the minority view was none of us had ever worked in sports before. We'd always kind of been fans or on the outside, and so for us to learn from him and to understand a little bit about like, is this something that we actually want to do, was really invaluable. I think part of that and part of seeing the Flames and the Kings, it became very obvious very quickly the discrepancies between the two leagues and how they're run and the trajectories that they were on, right? Like the NBL is coming off of massive growth, massive investment, massive, sellouts and fan reach. And, the Kings have this incredible platform. And then I would meet people in, the investment world or the family office world or the startup world and be like, oh yeah, like we have the Flames. And they'd be like, what is that? Is that a netball team? Is that a soccer? And it's just the brand reach and kind of knownness of the WNBL just wasn't there. So many people in the basketball world call the WNBL the best kept secret in sports, and it's like, well, why is it a secret? It's supposed to be this, far-reaching, marketable commercial league, and I think that was just kind of very evident very early on, having both the Kings and Flames, and so for us, we kind of identified the opportunity, and I remember coming to my mom and saying, hey, I think there's an opportunity there, and it's so broken, and my mom has this kind of rule: if you're going to complain about something more than once, you have to be willing to fix it. And so that was really kind of the genesis of where the WNBL opportunity and us putting our hands up to get involved was really, we care about this league and we care about women's basketball, and the opportunity is massive, right? You just have to look at women's basketball, globally in the US right now. There's this massive rocket ship taking off, and we have the talent, we have the resources, we have, the market here to be able to also capitalize on that, but it's just being missed because of, a bit of investment. And so for us, that is really kind of foundational to where we're trying to take that league.
Interviewing a number of business leaders over the course of my career, one of the most important traits that they've come across is resilience. And looking at the WNBL, like in 1981, so I'm an 81 baby, and it was the same year as the WNBL was created. It's the longest standing women's league in Australia, if not
it's
the
older
world.
than the WNBA.
Yes, and it's seen tough times, but it's kept going.
Yeah.
Right, it's still around. The team names have changed and the teams have come in and out, but the league has consistently, and continuity, another sort of trait that you want in sport and in teams, etc., been around now. How much of the past and do you look at? How much to the future do you look at, I suppose, to kind of drive this thing to be the next 45 years?
Yeah, I mean, for us, you're absolutely right. The resilience and kind of the impact that league has had on both the talent coming through, but also, to your point, it's the longest running women's professional sporting league in this country. And again, like I said, in 2025, it feels weird talking about diversity, but we have moved so fast as a society that, I don't necessarily know all the backstory, but like we're moving very quickly to a world where, female and male athletes are considered the same, and that wasn't necessarily true even 5-6 years ago. And so for me, we don't want to lose sight of that, and we don't want to lose the history and legacy of this league, but what we do want to do is pour some rocket fuel and grow it. And I think from a talent perspective too, the thing that mom always says when she's looking at a business, and we adopt as well in the startup world, is like the talent is what you're investing in, and we have some of the best female basketball players in the world that play in this league. And so how do we add some momentum behind that and add some marketing and add some broadcast dollars and really kind of fuel that? You're
incredibly passionate about basketball, but also the WNBL is an investment. It's
Absolutely.
Money, right? So you potentially want to get a return, I would think, on your investment. How do you balance the act of business versus love?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something we do across Wollemi, right? Like I say, it's impact capital. We are doing this for commercial reasons as well as impact, and I think the WNBL is true about that as well. Like we are not doing this out of charity. For us, it is really an economic opportunity. And again, you only have to look at the NBL to see what they've been able to achieve in a pretty short window of time as well. For us, it is really about capitalizing on the momentum of growth of basketball in Australia. There are so many people that play or want to play that can't play because there's not enough facilities to play in, and how do we capitalize on that, as well as like the commercial partners. You've seen massive growth behind the WNBA in the US because of the commercial drivers behind it, right? Even the Matildas moment here, people underappreciate how much corporate Australia getting behind that brand and that momentum really had. And so for us, it is a real opportunity to unlock. There's so many potential partners in the Australian ecosystem that I think basketball is a really good fit for, that we just want to unlock. And I think for us, that's really key, as well as the media and the broadcast and kind of the way that people view sports is changing, right? Like the platforms you watch it on, the way you engage, right? And so for us, can we really be a pioneer in that space, both from the digital consumption and kind of where people are watching it and how they watch it and kind of the narrative around that. And I think for us, that is a real commercial opportunity.
And the blueprint of owning a league, different to owning a team, and there's not too many kind of precedents. I mean, look at Larry, and the NBL is one example or case study on that. When you sit down now, you've owned it formally probably for a month or two now. Where do you start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, we very much went on a learning tour while we were kind of negotiating the deal and getting to April 2nd. We had that date kind of flagged for a long time. And
not April 1, right? Because
not April 1, it's not a joke. And we actually ended up signing a couple days later, so I forget the actual date, but early April. And so for us, we did what we would do with any business. We went and met with a bunch of, like-minded people to learn from. I think the WNBA was a really, big kind of wealth of knowledge that we tapped in, both into some of the things that they did that didn't work and some of the things that they've adapted to and how have they kind of grown so much in the last 18 months. As well as, again, you mentioned the NBL. They obviously have had their model and they've had things that have worked and things that haven't worked, as well as, some of the learnings from other leagues has been kind of, we've come in eyes wide open without kind of necessarily a prescriptive view of how we're going to fix this. Like there's there's some low hanging fruit that is obvious. I think the broadcast being, front and center in the commercial framework of the league. But, other than that, we have what we think the league is capable of, but we don't have the, necessarily the roadmap all mapped out to get there. I think part of it is hiring incredible people that we think are aligned, and Jenny, who I know you met with, is one of those people. But for us, it really is, kind of an evolution, and we don't necessarily know what it'll be in 5 or 10 years, but we know where we want it to be and where we think it can be and how can we help it kind of get there, and then kind of the rest will be a little bit adaptable.
Sounds a little bit like a Series A investment or something,
yeah,
like an
absolutely.
early stage investment.
That's how we're viewing it. Again,
yeah.
We do so much in the startup world. Like to me, the WNBL is a startup with a really, incredible history and an incredible talent pipeline. But for us, we're kind of at this refreshed startup kind of.
And then
genesis.
the relationship with the NBL, how's that sitting, or where do you think that sits as two different leagues? And looking at AFL, you've got the different seasons and the AFLW, and you've got the WBBL and the BBL. They've got the same team names, the same everything, same colours. But in basketball, the NBA and the WNBA is different teams, and the same in Australia here. How are you looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, from an NBL perspective, so they're the operating partner of the WNBL. So again, to tap into the resources that they have and they have built, and kind of creating synergies. I think there's a lot that we've learned from the Kings and Flames that you can use one to help the other. But, I do strongly believe that both teams need and both leagues need their own identity, their own fan base. It's great where there's overlap and there are people who love basketball and we want them to be a fan of both. But there are also people who love women's basketball and people who love men's basketball. And again, in creating those audiences, I think, you become much more value add to the people that you're talking to. And again, there will be casual fans across both and there'll be diehard fans across both. But for us, it really is important that the WNBL doesn't, become the little sister of the NBL. That was never our intention and very much not how we view it and not how the NBL views it either, to be fair to them. For us, it really is, it's its own thing, and there are, synergies. It's the same sport, but there's also some really crucial differences.
And you've made a change early, which has been allowed and seen by a lot of people in terms of the collective bargaining agreement, in terms of raising the minimum wage. Can you talk about the thought process behind that? And as you said before, getting the Flames and the Kings and other, men's and women's sport up to equal.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, and I talked about it, the talent is crucial, and it's part of the reason that we're so excited by the opportunity. But, it's no secret that women, collectively as professional athletes, but in basketball is no different. They haven't necessarily, gone from a place of growth from a salary perspective, and so the CBA was really for us really important to show the athletes that we want to invest in them. But it was also important from a 4-year window point of view. For the last 4 years since we've been involved, we've had a 1-year kind of rollover, and there's so much uncertainty that causes, both from a club perspective as well as a player perspective. And so for us, it was really kind of being very loud and intentional with that, and again, trying to get to that minimum wage pay parity was really, really important. But we still have work to do, and again, we very much come from this place of growth and opportunity, and we see this huge opportunity from an investment perspective, and we want the athletes to be part of that, and we want them to reap the rewards. It's very much not we really think that like rising, what's the saying?
The rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Lifts all boats, and we want our athletes to be part of that. We want our clubs to be part of that. It's not a matter of us just sitting at the top, sitting pretty. It really is growing the whole ecosystem. And for us, the biggest challenge we have right now is the amount of Australian incredible athletes that we lose overseas, right? And so if we can, start making inroads to getting some of that incredible talent back playing in Australia, it's just going to help us achieve what we want faster.
And Victoria, you mentioned the word ecosystem, but taking it back to the grassroots basketball has exploded in terms of the numbers of participation. I think there was, I think your brother might have mentioned there's 150 courts that are short every weekend, and also at some point in time we see women drop off playing sport, etc. How are you looking at the grassroots as an owner of the league now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, both from a pipeline perspective, but also just, a wellness of society and community perspective. I think, again, if I think about my own childhood and how important sports were for me, I think that it's so important to keep encouraging kids to play sports. Again, we're in this world now where iPad kids are a thing and losing that sense of play and outdoor activity, and I think sports are still a really good way to motivate kids to kind of break out of those shells. So for us, they're really important. I think as well from a community perspective, like basketball reaches a lot of communities that other sports don't. Basketball is a global game, and it just takes, again, looking around the Sydney ecosystem, from a social perspective. When I play on, Wednesday nights, it's a very diverse group of people that are playing, and I think, keeping them front and center as well. It might not look like your average, other sport kind of fan base, and for us it's really important to kind of weave those into how we're thinking about it. Even I know the Kings are quite successful in partnering with the Savannah Pride and the work they do in the South Sudanese community, and then again from a talent pipeline perspective, we have 3 incredible South Sudanese players for the Kings, and that's starting to happen on the women's side as well. There's obviously some challenges, and pay is a really big piece of that, and having a viable professional career that can pay the bills, I think, is a really big piece of that. But for us, having grassroots and kids playing basketball, that's the fun part, right? Like going to a court and playing pickup. I think, basketball is one of those sports where, yes, it can be one person and a ball and a hoop, but you can come up and we can play, and
Are you offering us to play basketball here?
Maybe after.
Maybe donkey. What was that? Donkey in the game?
Oh, horse.
Horse.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
The donkey might be the Queensland version.
Maybe.
I'm not too sure. But
Maybe.
You mentioned about the success of grassroots continuing to play, make it a profession for people, which is very important. But now we live in a bit of a digital age, which is social media and whatnot, and there's short form clips, there's KO minis, there's all sorts of different things where kids and adults can consume content quickly, easily, wherever they want. How important is the storytelling element as the owner of the WNBL from a club level and from a play level and from a league level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is like paramount to the success of where we're heading. I think, again, to my point, the talent in this league is like immense, and we have some of the best players in the world that play in this league, and they aren't household names, and they should be, right? Like Jade Melbourne is a perfect example. She was the youngest player in the WNBA 2 years in a row, right? Like, again, she's a phenomenal talent. She was, the starting point guard on our bronze medal winning Opals team. She's such a personality, and yet, your average Australian sports fan wouldn't know who she was, which, again, if you think about the male equivalent and the boom of Australian boomers and Australian men playing in the NBA, like they are all household names, and that's incredible. And I want that for our women because they are just as talented and they are playing here, which I think is really exciting. Like, and Jenny may have told this to you because she loves saying it, like if you want to see an Olympian play in Australia on any given weekend, the WNBL is the place to do that. The NBL, yes, has some, but like a lot of those players play in the NBA. The soccer players aren't necessarily here, but like the Australian women are here and they're playing, and I think that they're accessible and, they want to engage with community. And I think that that's really, really exciting. And
having Sandy Brondella on the podcast recently, she's just been re-signed for LA, which would make this her involvement in her 7th Olympics.
Yeah.
Which is just like mind-boggling. Like I don't think anyone has been involved in 7 Olympics per se as a player, as well as a coach. And that elusive gold medal that she talks about of trying to get Australia there, I think she's itching and biting it. And if that happens in LA, where do you think basketball could go as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would be massive to do it in LA. It would be, again, massive to back it up and do it again in Brisbane. I think, we see a spike in Olympic sports around the Olympics, and for us, that is really so exciting. I think, Sandy is incredible in her own right? She's just won in the WNBA. She's won it kind of every
twice with
level.
Phoenix and New York, and then twice as a player and as a coach.
Yeah, exactly. She's won at every level, and she is so great at giving back to the ecosystem as well. She's helping bring other coaches up with her. She's helping bring players. Again, I think we just had more Australian women in training camps in the WNBA than we've had maybe since kind of the early days. And so for us, that is really, exciting news. Why isn't that, what all of the mainstream media outlets are covering, and how do we get that story? And even Sandy, again, she is incredible, and she's well known in basketball circles, but how many of your average sports fans know about her? And so for us, that player and coach and people around the game storytelling piece is so crucial. You see, again, when the ingredients are there and the success is there, you see what can happen with the Matildas, right? Like, nobody knew Mary Fowler's name before that World Cup, really. Sam Kerr, yes, but a lot of those other Matildas weren't really household names, and now they all are, and that's what I want for basketball.
Yeah, and bringing some of those past players that played in the WNBL that have gone on to do different things, and the legacies that they've left behind them, how do you get them involved? How do you get, I suppose, the buy-in from everyone, and also the feedback you get from people? How are you absorbing it all?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the thing about sports that we've learned, I mean, especially in the clubs business, everyone has an opinion, good or bad. And when you're winning, people's opinions are happier than when you're not winning. And, so like that just comes with the nature of sports and the passion that people have for sports. And I think that that's, the exciting unlock. There needs to be a better way for us to get a lot of that feedback. I think we're getting it kind of anecdotally at the moment. And again, that's one around fan engagement that I think Jenny will definitely tackle. And I'm sure her, her background in kind of the social media space will really help her unlock that. But again, for us, we're very much in the infancy of this journey, and we're going to iterate, and we're going to, do things and try things. And we're here to kind of radically change the trajectory of this league. And, not every step that we take is going to be the right step, but hopefully we can kind of iterate and learn from what we're doing and kind of go from there.
You said you don't know where it potentially could be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. At a personal level, are you a goal setter? Do you have goals, like short-term, long-term?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some very low-hanging fruit goals from my perspective for the WNBL. Sorry, I just touched the microphone.
That's all right. It's a dunk, but it's authentic, right?
I think, the obvious one is I want as many people watching Flames games as Kings games. And again, that's the example in my backyard. But I think that, like, the audience reach for the WNBL, there's no reason it can't mirror the men's game in this country. And so for me, that is very much a goal, as well as kind of that household name. Again, I'll give you another example. I caught up with Tess Madgen 2 weeks after the Paris Olympics at a coffee shop in Melbourne, and I was so excited to see her. She literally pulled her bronze medal out of her bag to show me, and we're in this very busy coffee shop in South Yarra, and I don't think anyone in there knew who she was. And to me, that is really sad, right? Like, and she's literally got a piece
really
of
heavy
history
medal as well.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm freaking out. I think it's so cool. It was such a moment, and for them to get there after kind of the adversity they faced, like, incredible.
They lost the first few, I think.
Exactly.
It was.
They lost the first game and then bounced back, and had to win with their back against the wall. They had to keep fighting, and that's the Opal spirit, right? Like, they're just so resilient, to use your earlier word. And so for me, like, 3-5 years after LA, when we medal again, I want whoever it is, the captain of that team, whoever it is that I'm having coffee with, to get mobbed by people. And that person will probably hate that, but, like, to me, that's a good outcome, right? Like, I can't walk anywhere with Luke or Andrew and not get mobbed, right? And so why can't we have that for our female athletes?
Yeah, that's a great point. And getting that getting that league structure right as well. You've started touching on that in terms of the number of teams and the competition. How important is it to kind of make sure it's geographically spread, but everyone's kind of happy?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge. If you look at the split of WNBL teams at the moment, we're more than half regional, which again, if you were starting with a blank sheet of paper, I don't know if that's what you would do. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And so for us, we have this real authentic opportunity to tap into regional Australia in places where there aren't other professional teams or there's very few. And so for us, how do we kind of make sure that we're talking to that audience? And again, the grassroots community programs in the regional communities are really important. And some of the clubs do it incredibly well. Townsville has had so much success, right?
Their social media is unbelievable as well.
Their community and reach is incredible. And you now see it, like they have an incredible pipeline of talent, both playing in the league domestically as well as going to US colleges out of Townsville, right? Like they definitely punch above their weight, and I'm sure it is 100% because of that team and what they do in community. And so we have a real opportunity to do that. I think, from a landscape perspective, there are some very glaring holes from a capital cities perspective that we would love to address, as well as just, kind of putting our kind of mark on improving the teams that we do have while then also expanding.
Yeah.
Is that lawnmower in the way?
Well, that's right. Again, authentic. We're right in the heart of Sydney here at Centre Court. We're hearing lawnmowers go past. How good. Christine did talk about the Jack Jumpers and the Tasmanian team, and obviously being from Brisbane, we haven't had a team for 20 odd years, so there's some considerations to think about there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when we go back to the venues conversation, right? Like there's so many incredible venues being popped up in Brisbane around the Olympics. Obviously the Jack Jumpers too, like what they've done with their venue down there. I mean, there's some real opportunity to expand the league. I think from a talent perspective, we can absolutely expand it. But again, we don't want to expand too quickly, and we want to, preserve the longevity of clubs. I think one of the things that, to your earlier comment, the WNBL has seen a lot of clubs come and go, and that's really hard as a fan, right? Like even in the last, 3 years since we've been involved, clubs have changed ownership. We've lost the Melbourne Boomers, which you would have thought was one of the strongest brands in the league, and again, really excited that we've added Geelong and kept 8 teams. But again, from a fan perspective, if I was a Boomers fan and am I now a Geelong fan?
You're out a little bit. Not if you're AFL for sure.
Yeah,
definitely not if you're AFL.
Yeah, exactly. And trade in your purple for some blue, and so from a fan perspective, having that kind of certainty that your team's going to be there next year and that, they're going to be competitive and they're going to grow, I think that's really, really important to the success of the league long term.
And Christine also talked about the game day experience. What are you thinking about the game day experience to be maybe a little bit different to the NBL?
Yeah, I agree with her without knowing exactly what she said. I think,
she said like getting people to the games, the hard part. When they get there, they love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Back, right? I've never brought someone to a WNBL game and not converted them into a fan. Like it is really fun. It's really authentic. It's really easy to watch. Like it's really competitive. And so from my perspective, that's the easy part once they're there, but it's getting them there. And I think it's too just understanding our audience and how do we talk to them. Again, if I think about the Kings and Flames example, there are things that work really, really well on Flames game day. We have, sign making competitions and things that like really get creative juices flowing, and like the fans that come to our Flames games love that. We have face painting and things like that. Would that work on a Kings audience? I'm not sure. And so for us, it is trying to experiment and kind of do that. I think, something that the US does really well, especially for, some of their other leagues, like they really innovate on their game day experience. And so how can we kind of take some of those learnings and kind of really create this festival of you're coming to a game and it's a lot of fun and, you want to be there. I think there's some real opportunities for us.
And the integration on activations with sponsors as well.
Absolutely.
Like the NBA last year was one of the guys deliberately missed a free throw to kind of get free chicken wings for everyone like that. Yes. It was kind of like this, this tie-in with business as well. How are you thinking about that in terms of getting a sponsor, major sponsors, lots of sponsors, etc., and their role in kind of just not popping up for 1 year, being a little bit, continuous?
Yeah, absolutely. We want people to come on this journey with us. And again, from a sponsor perspective, you're getting in early. And I think that is really important. Again, we want people who are values
getting
aligned.
in early, even though it's been around for so long, but getting in early with the new ownership group.
Getting in early with the new ownership group and getting in early with where we're going.
Yes.
I think is really, you're right. And I think, from a sponsor perspective, again, we want to be creative, and I think we have license to be creative, given that we are refreshing the brand and we are refreshing what we're doing. And again, we want values aligned partners, and we're willing to kind of work with them on what makes sense for them, right? Again, if I think about the Kings and Flames, one of our loudest points in a game day is the Harvey Norman giveaway at third quarter break. And again, you have not heard loud until you've heard 10,000 kids screaming for an Xbox, right? And I think for them, that is such a, important.
The giveaways are so good with kids, like even water bottles
absolutely,
and hats
absolutely.
and throwing them out like the rockets and things like that. It's so much fun.
And so again, finding authentic ways to connect with our sponsors to do that. Again, I know, we've had sponsors that have wanted to do different things, whether it's, in community or whether it's, with our teams or with our other sponsors. And so for us, it is really kind of connecting that patchwork. But, we're absolutely having conversations, and we're also trying to unlock brands that may have never spent in the sports ecosystem in Australia before, because there's a real opportunity there, and we are trying to do things differently. And again, if you look at the success that the WNBA has had and Unrivaled, right, like some of the brands that they've brought on, especially, female-centric brands that have never spent in the sporting space, like that is really exciting for us.
Yeah, and widening the pie, the addressable audience of people that want to be a part of it, and getting your name out there through storytelling, and also the broadcast rights is very important, as you mentioned. Victoria, I'm going to touch on you for a second, your life. We do this thing called the Scoreboard moment, where it's a moment in your life whereby it's pretty vivid. It's a memory. You go, I remember that clearly, and from that moment, something changed. Your Scoreboard moment.
I think there was, and again, I'm trying to maybe the way my brain is wired isn't as specific as a picture perfect moment, but I do think that there's probably two around basketball. I think the day that we kind of signed the initial minority owner agreement to become involved with the Sydney Kings and Flames was really surreal, a very much a pinch me moment. And I think going to our first Kings game, unfortunately the Flames last game was kind of after, or the last game was before we fully kind of became minority owners, so we didn't get them the first season, but the Kings were still playing, and I think that first game where we had kind of signed all of the agreements and we're like, this is real, that was super exciting. And then, again, it was kind of like one of those movie timelines, because we won the championship that first season as minority owners, and again, everyone at the time was like, this doesn't happen all the time, don't take this for granted, but there are definitely moments, especially with my brother Matt, where I would just be like, wow, this is cool. And so I think for me that was probably a surreal moment. And then I think from a WNBL perspective, it was such a drawn out process, negotiating first the term sheet and then the NBIO and then the transaction, and the legal mechanics of the transaction kind of probably took away from the gravity of what we were doing. And it wasn't until kind of the surreal moment for me was, we brought Lauren on as an advisor for the WNBL. And again, I grew up watching Lauren. I grew up, this legendary
Seattle in the WNBA.
Yeah, exactly. This legendary icon, and she's calling us to get involved with what we're doing because she believes in us. And to me, that was a very
awesome. That's powerful.
Surreal moment.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the importance of her as a brand for what she's achieved in women's basketball, to then be part of this group and this movement. It's pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, she has created something incredible with She Hoops and the grassroots connections that she has, but she is a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of ideas, and for her to want to work with us and kind of take the WNBL to where we think it can get to is really incredibly exciting.
Now, another one I ask is someone's all-time favourite sporting moment. Victoria, your all-time favourite sporting moment?
Yes, I have a few. I think from a from a fan perspective, seeing the 2008 Celtics win the championship was very real. That was the first team that I followed that had won a championship, and so that was very much oh, winning is great. I think from a personal perspective, again, I touched upon it, being on that kind of tailwind of the Kings win that first year and being like in the tent and seeing behind the scenes was really incredible. In terms of like an in-game moment, I'm probably not as like vivid with my recollections as my brother, because he has like a picture perfect kind of memory. But again, I think for me, like the game I remember watching was watching Michael Jordan play when I was, in fourth grade for the Wizards. I wasn't old enough to see him in the Bulls days, but again, seeing someone of that gravity.
Forgot about that, actually. He played baseball as well.
He did. Seeing someone of that gravity like play a game, I think just like to me was like, wow, like the power of sports is like really limitless.
Yeah, and forever. And Jordan obviously made a lot of money with his shoe sponsorship. And I'm looking at your shoes right now.
Yeah.
And they're very funky. And I know it's a podcast, so we might not have vision of that. But you want to describe to the listeners what you're wearing right now? It's pretty out there.
Yeah, they are the Asia Wilson A1s. Again, her first signature shoe. She is the best women's basketball player in the world at the moment. And there's a bit of fanfare around her shoes, so I couldn't resist wearing them this week.
And are you a sneaker collector?
I am, although I wear all my sneakers, so that I'm not like one of those pristine.
Oh, you don't have them in the cabinet, you know?
I don't.
Well, you have them in the cabinet to wear.
Yeah. I also couldn't justify buying some of the like really expensive ones because I want to wear them, but then how do you wear them? So yeah.
Victoria, one final question. We're sitting here in 2025 and we've got girls out there playing basketball, and they might be 15 or 14, etc., and they want to, potentially play professionally, and there's a pathway to be professional. What's some advice you want to give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think just keep going, keep playing. There's some incredible stories of resilience. One of our Olympians who's currently at a WNBA training camp, has an incredible story about how she almost stopped playing basketball. And I think, especially as a young girl and a teenage girl, there are a lot of things that happen in your life, both from a friend perspective and a social perspective and a life-changing perspective, and sports are sometimes hard to prioritize in that, but I think keep going even if it doesn't feel like you're getting to where you want to go. Like just keep going, I think is really, really important.
Victoria Denholm, thank you so much for coming on and hosting us here in Sydney on Scoreboard. I wish you all the best with Wollemi Capital Group's. Yeah, and looking forward to seeing what happens in the WNBL coming up in the first season under new ownership. Looking forward to following the progress in coming years and looking forward to helping. Victoria, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.